we're talking all things marriage. So, for those of you that are just joining me, you can go back and catch up on the segments that we already have done. I think it was about 6 or 7, but we talked about the complexities of marriage. We also talked about the dynamics of purity, what that purification phase looks like, what the dating phase looks like, on through the engagement phase, and then in marriage. 10 ways that you can actually show up. So I'll run over those quickly, but the complexities in marriage we discussed were surrounding emotional unavailability and the traumas that stem from males that typically bring this into a relationship or a marriage. And then for those women, complexities that typically were seen were surrounding around the inability to respect and honor the spouse, the husband. And so that led us to the purity phase, which talked about, you making sure that you have unhoused any skeletons, you've worked through any insecurities, you've worked through all of your baggage or trauma, this be from childhood or previous relationships, because you don't ever want to bring anything negative into something that's new. And so working through that, we talked about that. And then we also talked about what it looks like, the red flags during the dating phase, during the courtship, during the engagement phase that you should be identifying and talking about. This is an open discussion that you should be having with your spouse prior to you even accepting a proposal or moving forward with the marriage, especially if there are things that are deal breakers, such as your character showing signs of you not being able to maintain a faithful relationship, or just a balance in you emotionally showing up and being available as you are going to vow within a marriage. So that was followed by just that dating process. And then once the honeymoon phase wears off, how are you supposed to be showing up? Because yes, it's one thing when the dopamine is there, but then what does it look like when you are actually not under the dopamine anymore? So when you're out of the dopamine phase, what does that look like? What does that look like? And so when you look at that, you start to say, okay, well, how am I actually supposed to be showing up? How am I supposed to be secure? How am I supposed to present myself for my partner, for my spouse, for my husband, for my wife? All of these different areas and ways that you're supposed to show up, we talked about. So we talked about those. And the 10 ways that we went over were being present, being respectful, being kind, being forgiving, being accountable, being loving. Because love is not just an emotion, it is an action. You have to choose this over and over and over again when you are in a marriage. And so being respectful. Then, you know, we got to being kind, being forgiven. When you're being forgiven, you're giving grace. You're giving grace to something that is not earned, to someone that's not earning it. You do it because that's what you're called to do. And so that's important in marriage. And then we also discussed being of value, bringing that same value, keeping that momentum, keeping things going as you are in as you're in that marriage. And then being intentional. You want to be intentional. Next, being proactive. You want to be proactive. That's followed by being faithful. Not cliche. No, we really talked about being faithful so that you do not fall into this dynamic of you showing up into something and then checking out when the going gets tough. We also discussed being honest. And lastly, being excited. And so that brings us to where we are today, which is 10 ways to show up as a wife. So, one second, guys. I'm going to rotate this.